This is the Power Break Podcast number 078, titled Overlooking The Obvious. Hi, I'm Bob Brubaker along with JT, as we hope you'll stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life.
This is the Power Break Podcast with a focus on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical aspects, all to help you succeed in the race of life. For show notes from today's podcast, go to bobbrubaker.com and follow the link for the Power Break Podcast. How are you, my friend?
Well, Jan and I were on a little vacation the last couple of weeks.
Well deserved.
And,
well deserved.
Well, we've really rested. That was what it was all about. And I guess you didn't get a whole lot of training in either over the holidays.
No, I was the antithesis of training. I'm quite sure. Yeah,
Then you did that Ragnar.
I trained my arm to find my mouth, I think.
Oh, there you go. Well,
with food in it. Yeah.
It's been a while since we recorded one. Since this is the first time back, even though there's been a podcast in the 2020s since the year change. Anyway, as we talk about things today, we want to first of all thank you, each of our listeners that have taken time to give us a rating. I heard one podcast even say, "Can you give us a 5-star rating?"
Oh, yes.
And it really does. It does help people find the podcast.
It does, for sure.
And also any reviews that you give us, we appreciate that. And just to help us spread the word via social media or word of mouth, however you do it, we appreciate you spreading the word about the Power Break Podcast.
We do, for sure. Yep. And we are so humbled by all your comments, all your suggestions, everything. It's just fantastic. We really appreciate it.
People want to know, do you still have the beard?
I do not still have the beard. It is so the story behind that was, as a police officer, at least at Largo Police Department, you're not allowed to have anything but a mustache, which is very 1970s, and I won't wear one. No offense to anybody, but I look like a goofball with a mustache. So
a goofball.
I do. So we were able to do the full beard, which I did for No Shave November. So you had to donate some money to the cause, but you're allowed to do it. And then our chief decided, well, I'm going to let you extend it if you do these things. And there was a list of things that you could do to kind of extend it. So we got No Shave November and No Shave December. But yeah, January 1st, it all had to come off. So I'm back to the baby-faced and clean shaven.
Is that what the criminals call you? Babyface Sergeant Trevino.
That would be one of the nicest things they've called me recently. So I would be very happy with it.
Well, the big question we have for you as we start our program today is, JT, are you one of those guys who buys local, or do you search the internet?
That has actually changed over time for me.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. I used to kind of be the internet guy, and now I will always choose local over that. There's a bunch of different reasons for that, but I personally just tried to put myself in the shoes of, especially this was true for bike shops, as you talked about in your article. Man, they got to pay for a storefront, they got to pay for brick and mortar, they got to pay for employees, they got to pay for all that. That's why it's a little more expensive. But what you get out of that is face-to-face service and usually way better customer service, right?
Yeah.
So I was really convicted by that, because I started to think about how I would feel if I was a brick and mortar business and people are coming in, trying all my products and then finding it cheaper on the internet and ordering it. Man, that's a heartbreaker. How about you?
Well, then they brag about it.
Anyway, it's even worse.
We'll talk more about that.
That's right.
I'm with you. I like to check local first and realize that any store owner, even if it's a franchise of a big name or something like that, they put a lot into being local, and why not support the local guys? And I've really found that the ease and convenience of shopping online is, well, it's good to a point, but it does take away from the local economy, especially the shops that depend on loyalty.
Yes.
I'm thinking running stores and then even, as we mentioned, bike shops. But then you take it to the next level and think about the local church. You ever think about the ease and convenience of taking advantage of big ministries, online? Yeah. Okay, and then they push that. It takes away from the building up and even the existence of the local church. But anyway, that's what we're talking about today. Overlooking the obvious.
Yeah, for sure. And that should be obvious to all of us, because really, I recently thought a lot about this, because we have started to put a lot more online at my church, Skycrest. Now, our purpose for doing it is isn't to keep people from coming to church. Our purpose is there are some people that are sick enough to where they can't get to church. Right. So we want them not to be left out. But what ends up happening is people are like, oh, well, I don't have to go to church either. I can just catch it online. And then you start to actually not go to church.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what...
Because the church is people together.
I was overheard of a conversation of some people that are part of a very large mega church in the area that streams their service live every
I am
Sunday.
aware of which ones you are talking about.
Anyway, so people overheard my wife, my beloved Jan, said that she was overhearing some people talking about the fact that they didn't want to fight the crowd on Sundays. They just stayed at home in their jammies and watched the service on the television.
Man, that's just heartbreaking.
It is really. It is really. Well, it is something I really want to talk about today. So
yeah, this is one of your passions, and it should be, and it's one of my passions as well. You know, because for me, it really is all about connection. Church is all about being together and worshiping as a body. We're called to do that throughout Scripture, which I know you're going to talk about more. But yeah, let's talk about your article, Overlooking the Obvious. If you haven't been to BobRubiger.com, folks, I would encourage you to do that and subscribe to his article. It will pop up every single Monday. The MailChimp will make sure that happens.
The MailChimp.
The MailChimp, that guy. So I would encourage you to do that. But, yeah, this is a passion for not only you but me. So really, I was looking forward to coming in here and talking about it.
All right. Well, here we go. So the article is called Overlooking the Obvious, my Power Break blog from this past week. And I mentioned that I have some friends with the local retail shops that feel the pinch from the big online retail giants. So I'm kind of sensitive about the fact that ways of modern consumer will soon leave the local community without the benefits of a local retailer. It happens in all kinds of businesses, actually, from retailers to insurance agencies to jewelers, even lawyers and funeral services. You can shop online. Well, stop and think about it, though. The number of ads you receive via email that pull you away from a personal touch of a local business to the flash of the quick but impersonal response from the big businesses online. It's interesting, though, how my friend with a local running store who gives endlessly to the community, as well as providing not only a place to purchase running shoes, but gives hours of time listening to runners and coaches. And he does some coaching on right there in the store and encourages local athletes to keep pressing on. And then to find a growing number of people who come in to be fitted for the best shoe possible, only to leave and buy the shoes online.
Man.
And where they say they can go to get a better price. Or the local bike shop from whom a multitude of cyclists rely on for repairs and replacement parts that are needed in a rush, only to find that the most of those same local cyclists boast of the deals they get online and never even give that local retailer a chance.
Yeah, it's just wrong. It really is.
Well, then we turn to the problem that's not only common to local businesses, it's really a problem felt by local churches. People don't realize how seemingly good national ministries take away from the local church as people compare their pastor to the big preachers that they hear via the internet, or they neglect the local teaching in the local church because the quality is not up to what they find elsewhere. Or worse than that there's total neglect of worship for the local body because they feel they can get what they want by listening or watching to recorded messages or watching things on streaming online.
Yeah, you know, I've always been, and we were talking a little bit about video studies and stuff like that before we went on air. But, you know, when it happens in real life, when you're there and there's an interaction and the pastor sees the crowd, kind of sees reaction, oftentimes, you know, the spirit will kind of take over a little bit. It's genuine. It's not practiced. What you see online is probably very directed and rehearsed and very there's some good disingenuine to a certain extent.
There's some good. I'm not opposed to national ministries or well-known speakers. I mean, I've gleaned much from that.
Guys. So have I, for sure.
When the national ministry, however, becomes a substitute for the local ministry rather than a supplement, therein lies the problem. It's interesting how I've heard of many well-known ministries say they are for supporting the local church, but never admonish their followers to give preference to their time and loyalty and financial support to the local church and their local pastor.
Right. That's true.
It kind of says, one day, what do you want? To go out of business? Stop and think about what happens as a result of placing the well-known ministries above the ministry of the local church, just like the local businesses, if you place the big businesses online over the local business, well, soon the pastor of the local church becomes discouraged because he hears the comments of people who are listening to well-known preachers as they make comparisons with the local pastor coming up short.
Yeah.
It's interesting then, I'll mention the second thing was the lack of gifts that are developed in the local churches, a failure to support Bible studies and other teaching opportunities that leave what could be gifted teachers or preachers never seeking to develop the gift because there's a lack of opportunity. We were talking about that before, but stop and think about it. How many young men do you see coming up in the ministry in the local church? And then what opportunities do they have?
To actually turn around and actually teach and use their gifts.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. They don't have any. Yeah.
Well, think about the lack of people who attend in services who portray the fact that they are mature Christians. They say that anyway, but they feel comfortable about staying home or doing something else on the Lord's Day because they're well fed by the teachers throughout the week that they hear online or podcast.
Yeah.
People, please don't substitute the Power Break podcast for going to church.
No, that's for sure. That is for sure.
I'm not implying that we're so great, but anyway. Finally, the other thing I mentioned, that when funds that should be designated to the local church become divided among other ministries, when appeals to year-end giving and other times draw the attention away from the local church and the local church is neglected, you'll soon find the local church lacking in funds, which is it's a very big case today.
Oh, yeah, for
and
sure.
The final outcome is for the local churches, the scenario that is set exactly like local businesses that slowly dry up, and the local community wonders, what happened? They're gone.
Yeah. Yeah, the very last thing you talked about, I will tell you, I watched that in Largo. As a police officer there for 23 years, when I first moved there, it was all local businesses, right? Mm-hmm. And then Walmart came, and Walmart changed everything and literally destroyed a lot of the local economy because people were like, I can get a lot cheaper at Walmart, which is absolutely true. Nothing against Walmart, but in my opinion, the customer service is pretty awful. And a lot of times the quality is awful.
Well, and it's not to downgrade that. It's just the fact
not to downgrade it. It's just that's the nature of it.
Oh, stop and think about when the local business goes away, you've lost the personal contact.
You have. I mean, you've eroded community.
The question I have for people is, would you buy a haircut online?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. Yeah.
Back when I was on the radio, one time this guy I used to do a little bit with every week. He was called Sammy the Greek or something like that. And
Sammy the Greek.
He would give predictions for the local football teams. You know?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it was kind of like Jimmy the Greek on TV. Or
I got
like
it.
Okay.
Right.
Anyway, it was play off of that, and one time he said there was a guy a Greek friend of his that owned a barber shop, and he was beginning to lose customers, and he was going out of business.
Yeah.
And so we were brainstorming on the air, like just being silly about it. But anyway, I said, what do you think about a drive-up window?
For a haircut. That would be awesome.
Both of us lost it. We laughed so hard when you stop and think about it. Would drive up, stick your head out the window, get a quick haircut.
I think I'm going to order that haircut online. That looks fantastic.
All right. Well, anyway, back to the giving of, it's interesting that in the book of Malachi it says, bring the tithes into the storehouse.
Yeah.
The storehouse would be comparable to the local church. So that's the place to go. Anyway, what's the guy's name? Kevin O'Leary on Shark Tank.
Oh yeah,
he says, "Stop the madness." So
I can't believe you'd ever quote him on our podcast. That's super funny.
Concerning the local businesses, buy local whenever possible. Give the local store a chance by going there first before you buy online. Get to know the local establishments and build a relationship with people.
Yeah, for sure.
It's totally different. I mean, my friend that runs the running store, people come in and he always says it's kind of like Floyd's barbershop. People just come in and sit down and chat for a while.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a St. Pete Running Company is another prime example of that. You can go in there and they usually have a keg sitting in the corner and you can have a beer and hang out and they'll do personal fittings, and they do all kinds of great video assessments of your running stride. They do everything.
Yeah, there's a bike shop.
But they try to make it a place to hang out.
There's a bike shop like that has down in St. Pete that has a coffee shop in the middle.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Well, concerning the local church, though, let's think about encouraging local pastors to make it by, of course, making sure that you're present whenever there is teaching and encouraging those who do teach to make sure that you look at outside ministries as supplements, not substitutes.
Yeah.
And even seek recommendations from the pastor about which outside ministries he would recommend.
Yep.
And then above all, supporting the local church first. Anything that you give elsewhere would be over and above your regular giving to the local church. So as we think about the year ahead, we're going to be continuing to talk about this on this program today, but as you think about the year ahead, think about really being part of your community. And the community in which you live, the community of believers, of course, too. That's the local church. And be mindful of the fact to do your part to make up the community as a better place through your encouragement and loyalty and support. Otherwise, you may wake up one day and wonder, what happened?
Yeah, why is there no church to go to?
Or why is there no business?
Yeah, you're right.
What happened to our businesses around here?
Yep.
Anyway, check out the blog. It's called Overlooking The Obvious. It's at bobbrubaker.com, where each of my blogs are published each week. And as JT says, make sure you sign up.
All right. What else is happening, Bob? What's new?
Well, let's take some time here to talk about a little book that I wrote on basic prayer training. As we talk about being involved in the local church, one of the best things you can do is have an effective prayer ministry yourself. Now, stop and think about it. The God of heaven has sovereignly ordained a means of communication with him. He's called prayer. And people sometimes say they don't pray, even though they say that they're devout Christians. And how could you neglect this very important part of life? Well, as I talk to people about this, one of the things I realized was that some people don't pray because they just don't know how to pray. So I put together a book called Basic Prayer Training. You'll find it on my website, bobbrubaker.com. Click on the resource page and then scroll down. You'll find the books there. Click on the books, and then as you scroll through there, you'll find it a blue cover, Basic Prayer Training. It's at bobbrubaker.com. And while you're there, check out the links to the sermons we preach. We're not trying to take away from the local church, but just here's a supplement of things I cover on our Sunday morning services here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church. It's all at bobbrubaker.com.
All right, so here we go. It's time for What About This? That's the time on the podcast for questions and answers. Feel free to submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com, and we'll get to answering those on an upcoming Power Break podcast. Are you ready for question number one?
Well, I have a question for you before we start.
Oh, it's a surprise question.
It's actually a mean question.
Oh, good. Here we go. Let's hear it. Why am I wearing shorts that are salmon color? Because I'm comfortable in my manliness, Bob. Don't ask me that. No, I'm sorry. I'm just messing around.
No, I was asked to ask you what your favorite donut is.
Oh, gosh. I already know where this comes from. You can tell Jan I have an affinity for apple fritters.
Okay.
That's right, folks. Apple fritters or bear claws are pretty good, but I'm going to go with an apple fritter.
You know, that's what they told me at the, is it called First Blood, the place that you donate blood?
I didn't know where you were going with that. What did they say?
Well, I went in there to give blood, and I said, "Where are the donuts?" I was hoping to get a donut.
And they said, "Why don't you bring us donuts?"
I said, "Wait a minute! I'm the one giving the blood."
Yeah, no, you should get donuts out of that.
I know.
Agree.
Anyway, I said, "Well, what kind of donuts should I bring?" And that's what they said: apple fritters.
Yeah. See, there's a place called Frida's around here, and this is free advertisement for Frida's. Doesn't get any better than that. If you're looking for an apple fritter, you need to go there. But you also need to bring like 5 people to help you eat it because it's humongous.
Oh, humongous.
Oh, they're huge, yeah.
Well, we got off on a tangent here.
Yep. That's all right. Are you ready for question number 1? It has nothing to do with fritters either.
Yep.
All right. Why is loyalty to the local church so important? Can't a Christian be a follower of Christ without being part of the local church body?
It would be really hard to be a Christian according to the standard set in the New Testament as a follower of Christ.
I agree completely.
There are 24 one another's in the New Testament.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
To love one another, to serve one another, etc. Building up one another. you cannot fulfill that if you're not part of a local church.
Yep.
I mean, if you're just floating on the outside and never really being part of the local church, you're not fulfilling those commandments.
Yep.
As you see, the local church is listed each time. Okay, we have the church at Ephesus, the churches of Galatia, the church at Corinth, okay, and the church at Colossae, and the church at Thessalonica. And you go through the book of Revelation in chapters 2 and 3. There are 7 churches that Jesus mentioned specifically. Yep. So that gives us an indication that local churches are an important part of the kingdom of God.
Yes, and the collection of people is what makes the church.
Right.
It's the people together.
It's not a building. It is
all of the churches were different, and he had different things to say to them in Revelation.
Right, and there's the big church, which is all the body of Christ, right?
Yep.
But that's mentioned very little, okay? But it's mainly the local church. And so the local church, as you read the admonishment to members of the local churches, that you'll find that it's not a spectator sport.
Yeah.
It's not come in on Sunday morning, view it, and then take off. It's not like going to a football game or a basketball game or a baseball game. Rather, it's a call to participation.
It's a direct interaction.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
And there's also a submission to leadership. And so you can't do that if you're not part of the local church.
Right.
Listen to this. It says he gave, in Ephesians chapter 4, he gave the apostles and prophets, the evangelists and shepherds and teachers to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. Okay. God provides men to teach the body of Christ, the local church, so that they do the work of ministry.
Right.
All right. The scene is often where the paid professional is the pastor. And people say, well, he needs to do the work of the ministry.
Oh, I don't know how many times I've heard that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So the saints do the work of the ministry for the building up of the body of Christ until we all attain the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness, deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way unto him who is the head, and to Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part, listen to that, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. If you're not part of a local church, you're not in that.
No, you're
not.
But
if you're in the local church, he says, it's not sitting around. You have an active participation in helping to build up the entire body.
Right, right.
And so you use your gifts, you use your care for other people. We are told to disciple each other and being discipled. So anyway, that's what I say. You really can't, I'm not here to judge whether you are or not a Christian, but if you have no interest in the local church, you're not matching up to what the New Testament says. Here's what a believer in Jesus Christ looks like. And
you're certainly not following the example of Christ himself. Mm-hmm. A lot of people believe that being a Christian is about following Christ's example. Mm-hmm. Okay? And most people wouldn't argue with me about that. Well, was his example just to kind of go off on his own and do his own thing?
It was to do the will of the Father, didn't he?
The exact opposite.
Yeah,
everything was about other people.
That's right.
Everything. Actually, this was something that I didn't know until I got really involved in my church and became a deacon and stuff like that. A lot of people kind of look at it as, well, it's the pastor's job, like you said, and he gets paid to do that. Most people don't realize that structurally speaking, at least in my church, and I know in your church, the pastor is just a teaching elder. Mm-hmm. He is one of the elders.
Right.
So the people who aren't getting paid are also considered the same.
Well,
right?
They have the care for the flock.
That's
they're under shepherds.
So you can't turn around and say, he gets paid, that's why he should do it. Well, the elders also should do it too, and they're not getting paid.
Right. Well, they have a care for the flock, but the responsibility is from all to help others do the work of ministry.
All of us.
To equip them. Yep. Anyway, that's question number 1. I think we covered that.
I think we did, yeah. I'm quite sure. All right. Dos. That's Spanish for 2, Bob, in case you weren't.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, I know.
Multiple languages.
I've been working
of
on
JT.
It. Yep.
Right to JT today.
I think that's French. Well, I don't know. Is it? Doué?
I don't know.
Maybe somebody French can get on JT at BobRubaker.com and tell me. So what do we do mentally to avoid neglecting our duties to the local church? And I know this is going to turn into my favorite conversation with you, which is all about time management and preparation and
well, there you go.
preparation.
I just turned
all right, sorry. We can go to question number 3. No, go ahead.
Well, first of all, as mentioned in the article, and we covered it earlier, but even as you check it out at BobRubaker.com, I'm really into supporting and encouraging the local pastor. Make it a point to be present. If you're not there present, it's a discouragement. I'm sorry, it really is.
Oh, it's got to be a huge discouragement.
And anyway, make it a point to support him and encourage him. An encouraging word goes a long way. As it says in the book of Proverbs, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Encouraging those who teach, there might be a young guy coming up that's teaching. Make sure that you look outside ministries as supplements and not substitutes, and maybe even seek the recommendations of your pastor or church leaders for if you do check out outside ministries. But above all, support the local church first and in your tithes and offerings, because anything you give elsewhere should be over and above what you regularly give to the local church.
Right.
So, okay, mentally, you bring your mind into conformity with the New Testament and the entire Bible says. You support God's work here.
Right.
If you don't, if you just keep looking beyond and say, I want something bigger, better, and better looking or whatever.
How could you get better looking than us? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I thought you said you had a face for radio.
I do. And anybody who knows me knows that's true.
And since I was on the radio, I reckon I do too. Anyway, check out the local church first. Put your mind on that. Understand they need you. And God has designed it that way. So before you turn elsewhere, turn to the local church. Just like we say, turn to the local establishment before you buy elsewhere.
Yeah. And and it's kind of a side note, but it's certainly related, is I go out of my way to make sure that I pray for those at my church that are in charge.
Good point. Good point.
And I do that. I will often ask them, and oftentimes they won't tell me because they're very humble people. And if something's going on, they're not ready to talk about it or whatever. I'll just ask them, is there anything that specifically that I can pray for you about? Because I'm going to pray for you anyway. But praying for the people in your church does a ton of things. Ooh. Number one, the prayers of a righteous man go directly to the ears of God, right? We know that. But we also know that keeps your heart attentive to the people that you need to. Mm-hmm. And you're becoming more of their church by praying for each other. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Good point.
So, all right. We are on question number 3. And we're going to turn to the physical. How important are goals in the physical side of life? So, obviously, we know spiritually goals are important and disciplines are very important. Same thing with mentally. Mm-hmm. How about this? How about the physical?
Well, you're not going to achieve much physically unless it's a goal. And a goal has to be something that's written down. People talk about having goal posters or at least putting it down on paper.
Right.
This time of the year, make your goals realistic. And, of course, you break it down into bite-sized portions.
Right.
I mean, one of my goals this year, 2020, is to do this bicycle ride out in the Denver area called the Triple Bypass.
Yep.
120 miles with 10,000 feet of climbing.
That's going to be awesome.
Okay.
But you certainly need to prepare.
Yes. So I have broken down my training.
Yep.
And so I know where I need to be at different points. And so here we go.
Yep.
So that's important. You have any big goals coming up this year physically?
Well, I was just sitting down and I was thinking about it because, Ragnar has passed. We talked a little bit about what our goals are next year, but that seems like an eternity because it's next December, right? As far as Ragnar is concerned.
Oh, okay.
So, I was just sitting down and I was trying to figure out what my next actual race is going to be. Because that's always, you and I have talked about it all the time. You sign up for races so you'll continue to train.
Yeah. That's interesting. Right? I had a Facebook message from my friend up in Kentucky named Carl Lutz. He and I did many triathlons together, and we used to train a lot, and he's a dentist and very successful dentist too, and yet he would find time to train, and we would always say while we were training, we race to train rather than train to race.
It's so true.
And the reason we did is because we would sign up for races so that it kind of pushed us out the door, and we didn't feel like training. That you'd say, "Whoa, I've got this race coming up. I better get going here."
Yeah, and right after Ragnar, it went right into the holidays for me, so it quickly turned into. I don't really have a goal, so I don't really have to go out and do anything.
Folks, JT needs a race. Much. Would you please write to JT?
That would actually be awesome. If people need to pick a race that they think, and if you pick a marathon, I'm going to be really upset because I don't want to do a marathon. However, if they pick a race that's a local race around here in the Clearwater, Tampa area, I will do it.
5K or 10K?
5K or 10K, yeah. I will do it, and that will be my target. So I expect that at jt@bobbrubaker.com. And it can't be from Jan. It has to be from somebody else.
Well, keep in mind as we talk about goals and physical things that it does take discipline, and discipline, like we say, makes the difference in all aspects of life. Check out today's show notes at bobbrubaker.com. Click on the Power Break podcast. Today is show number 078.
And submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com and submit the race you want me to run in. And listen for Bob's answer or my shock when you pick a race that I don't want to do.
But you'll do it, folks.
I will definitely do it. Yeah, no, you guys have my word. And listen for the answer on an upcoming Power Break podcast.
Before we go here, let me just step in and talk about the little book that I've written called Running to Win. I've taken winning principles of the physical side and made it into a way that we look at the spiritual side of life as well. And some things I've taken from doing 19 Ironman triathlons. Anyway, on the covers, even the finish of when I did Ironman Lake Placid, New York.
It's awesome.
Check it out. It's at bobbrubaker.com along with all the books. You click on the resource page and scroll down to where it says books. Click on that and scroll down to the book called Running to Win at bobbrubaker.com.
Well, thank you for joining us for the Power Break podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you've downloaded the podcast, and check out show notes, news, Bob's weekly blog, and other cool things at bobbrubaker.com. And listen next time for the Power Break podcast.